Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It is a great pleasure to welcome back to the briefing Danny Seaman, who is no stranger of these briefings. Danny, great to see you.
Always happy to be here. Thanks.
Danny, we have a special announcement for all of our viewers who love hearing and seeing your opinions and your ideas, but we're not going to share it just yet. We're going to wait
Okay.
a few minutes, so everyone needs to stick around for what we want to share. There's a lot to cover today. Let's start off, of course, with what just happened. In the U.S., the top of the news is the Telegram chat group for the U.S. airstrikes on the Houthis. Here in Israel, the top news is that the Houthis are still sending missiles to Israel. And just today, we all went back into our bomb shelters. I think it was the third, at least, time
Yeah.
this week that life was disrupted to have to take shelter. Danny, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a good example because I don't get worried about these things. And I like to go to the window. It was actually quite spectacular because we saw the interception over Jerusalem. I don't want to give too much information about it to not assist our enemies. But the sirens went off, and those who have this thing on their phone, this app on their phone, that's scary. That really makes this siren sound. It's worse than the sirens outside. The only thing is that up until now, at least here in Jerusalem, it was convenient, if I can say, but in the middle of the night, we were home with the family, and my attention is more to the kids. My youngest, who's 11 years old. So every time it happened here, we know where he's at. We can be with him. We can calm him down. Today they were in school when this happened. So I'm sort of a bit apprehensive about that. And it takes a few minutes to get into the shelters, and then they're supposed to remain there for 10 minutes. And after that, they told the kids to call home. Today, everybody has their mobile phones with them. So they told the kids to call their parents, something that's unusual. They don't let them use the phones in school, but they let them take their phones, and they let them call to tell us that everything's okay, and that they went to the shelter, and they admitted to being a bit scared. A few of them were shaking. So, and we did hear, in addition to the sirens and seeing the interception, at least our missiles going out to intercept, we heard a lot of booms here. So it was very dramatic in that sense. This week we've been returning to normal, if you want to call it, the return to normal of the past year and a half. After we had the Houthis in the middle of the night, and last Friday I was in Ashkelon and my family, and we had a siren there, their first siren in over 2 months. So it's exciting here in Ashkelon. They're a bit more serious about it than I am because they have a bit more experience because for them it's not just something happening in the sky and you see the missiles and it's a nice photograph. They have a few seconds, and then the explosions, not of interceptions, but this didn't happen this Friday, not of interceptions, but they have the experience of the bombs exploding in the neighborhood. And so they take it much more seriously than I do. I'm not a good example, as I said. This should be taken and by the way, you did have just outside of Jerusalem in the Beit Horon area, parts of the missiles they fell. So it wasn't the explosion that we should be concerned about. It's the shrapnel. And when I talk about shrapnel, it's not from a grenade trap. These are huge pieces of missiles, both the ones that are intercepting and both the ones that are fired. And the ballistic missiles, which are huge, we're talking about sometimes 2 stories high, the missile itself. So when it's intercepted and blown up, huge pieces fall around. So you have pictures here in Israel from people in the villages in the Hebron area and in Beit Horon area of these huge pieces of missiles that fell. And so that's what we have to be careful of. That's why they tell us to go indoors, because if you get hit by this thing, it's a death sentence right there.
Dan, I find the most surprising piece of all of this is for those of us, you, me, who live in the center of the country, we weren't used to these alerts and having to run to shelter before October 7th. But this far into the war, it's almost commonplace, right? I remember in the beginning, we'd all take shelter and I'd be texting my kids and family, where are you? Where are you? And now, like today, it was okay. We all went in. Everyone kind of stayed on the same phone calls and the same workflow as they were doing. My kids were in school, and it's business as usual. So, in a
And
certain
my old
sense.
neighbor, I have a 90-year-old neighbor who's in, I wish I'll be in that shape in 5 years from now. 90 years old, sitting on the balcony. He didn't get up. He continued eating it wasn't sort of his early lunch. He continued eating. I said, "You're not running into the shelter." He said, "Nah, what's going to happen?" And by the way, my mom is the same. My mom is also 90. And in Ashkelon, she keeps reading the paper. She says, by the time I get up and I run in to the shelter, she's too old to do this. So I sit and continue reading my paper. My mom doesn't she's experienced enough in her lifetime that she's not nervous by these things.
As she should be. And I was going to say that on the one hand, it speaks to our tremendous resilience, but we shouldn't become accepting of this,
Right.
and we
And not
shouldn't
complacent
allow it to
about it.
say, no problem, we'll just keep running. Like, we have to make sure our country stops all of this.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you have some updates for us
Yeah.
in terms of
Yes.
what's been happening this war, please.
Yeah, today, well, in addition to the missile that we had here, the operation in Gaza is continuing. Israel is moving full force in. We have ground troops there. We also have the Air Force. They took out they fought today in the within 4 hours. They took over the Tel Sultan area near Rafah. It took them 4 hours to do this. People are saying, why is it happening now? Well, Israel has used the past few weeks or the past 2 months, which you had this ceasefire, to study and learn and improve itself on the activities that it did before. They studied the lessons, and the army is implementing these lessons right now, and we're using much greater force as it is. So here in Tel Sultan, they took over a Hamas base that was in a school, in a high school in Rafah. It was a Hamas base. They took it over. And they found there that you had a launcher with 25 barrels, missile launcher with 25 barrels that was in this school. And on Channel Israel, Channel 14, you can see the images of it. That was in the operation. Now, the interesting thing is that our ground troops are taking no damages. Hold on a minute. No, that's police. I heard another siren right now. It was a police siren. So yeah, police. Just so we're sure that we don't have to run to a secure room or anything. Going back to gathering my thoughts again. So we've had so far, thank God, no casualties in there because they're operating with renewed tactics and the kind of weapons being used. So we're learning lessons and improving and doing a lot better in those areas. Hamas can't go to the media with what's going on there because we took out their spokesman last night. The Hamas spokesman was taken out by the IDF. We've been targeting very successfully a lot of their commanders and have been very useful at that. We also took out the Radwan force commander in Lebanon, and there have been strikes in Syria. So we're operating on three of the, in addition to Judea and Samaria, where action continues in the Jenin area. So Israel is following up on all these, taking out the enemies in with precision and precise. Why are we more successful at it this time? I'd rather not say. I don't think I have my assumption, but I'll leave it at that.
Very good, Danny. Let's share everyone this news that I had mentioned in the beginning.
I saw somebody
But right, people have found out that, Danny, you are now hosting your own podcast on JNS, and you sent me the first episode. It's fantastic. Everyone should take a look. I'm sharing it right now in the Zoom chat. So if you're following us on Zoom, you can check it out here, and we'll put it, of course, in the description in the YouTube channel as well. So, Danny, you have many followers in this briefing who love hearing you, and now they can get exclusive Danny Seaman content on JNS
Well,
TV.
we hope to give them insights in what's haapening from Israelis. You don't get enough Israeli media. What you get are usually very extreme left wing, Haaretz newspaper, etc. Most of the foreign press here use them as their source of information, which is very misleading, and they don't get what Israelis are really feeling. And so that's what I'm going to try to do through the good services of the Jewish News Syndicate. that have been doing a great job up until now. Caroline Glick worked with them as well. Mark Regev, those of you who know him, Ruthie Bloom. There are a lot of other very good podcasts there as well. So I'll be joining them and doing a weekly podcast and providing insights onto what is happening.
Excellent, fantastic. Okay, in the news right now, and there were some videos coming out from Gaza about protests in Gaza. And we know, of course, in the past that Hamas has had a tight grip over the Gazan population and suppressed these protests. For whatever reason, they're rising up right now. And some people look at these protests from the Gazan people and see reformation and change and hope that Gaza can be rehabilitated. Danny, what do you make of all of this?
Oh, it will be rehabilitated, but not in the way they're expecting it to be. The demonstrations are nice. It's basically the Arabs in Gaza whining and about how terrible their situation is. You have some of them on the air saying very clearly that the ceasefire, they were able to get back to their homes. They were able to those who could locate their homes. I admit, I'm not hiding this. I'm very sad that some of them have homes to have located. We should be taking it all out because all of these were bases of operation. And anybody arguing with me over this, let me tell you, this is done deliberately, just like the tunnels that are underneath all of Gaza. Every house is used for the purpose of exactly what we're dealing with now and over the past few weeks. That when the Hamas terrorists who take off their uniforms and are and by the way, when you talk about violations of international law and war law, that's a violation. You cannot be fighting as a civilian, but they do that. And they use these homes knowing exactly in the children's homes, in the children's rooms, in every house, war arms depots that they know they can come in, get an RPG, get a weapon, fire at the Israelis, then escape through a tunnel. So that's why all these homes needed to be destroyed. Then the routes and the roads needed to be destroyed because underneath are all tunnels. So they're all complaining right now that, oh, they were going back to normal. They were going back to their normal lives. And now they have to leave and pick up, which is, I'm heartbroken over this. And I'm very, very cynical for those who don't understand it. What I don't see is them complaining about Hamas. Yeah, they want to get rid of Hamas. Yes, but they're not criticizing the Hamas actions. They're not showing any remorse on what happened over the past year or so. You don't hear any of that. You still hear, and they still believe that they have to defeat Israel. There's no difference. They're trying to create an impression. And here already, Haaretz newspaper, which I mentioned before, Haaretz newspaper today have that all the Israelis that are saying that there's no difference and there are no innocent people in Gaza, Haaretz already posted that by using this demonstration and pointing out, oh, here, you see, there are people who are against Hamas. Of course they are, because right now Hamas are causing them misery. But they're not different in what their aspirations for what they want to do with Israel. And by the way, it's not Israelis or government officials that are saying this. The hostages who were released, all of them say clearly that there were no innocent Gazans. They all partook and participated to some degree or another in the assault, in the celebrations, not only the celebrations, but the physical activities against the Israelis, whether it be hostages, whether it be bodies, whether it be going into the kibbutzim and the villages and pillaging so none of them are innocent in that sense. They all partook in this and they all want this to happen. It just didn't turn out the way they wanted it. So right now they're paying the price for that. But beyond that, what I see behind this is, and the encouragement of this is not only their situation, but the Arab countries, especially led by Egypt, are trying to divert attention away from what is happening there right now. There are huge changes happening, not only in the American position, which wants to have the relocation and allow them to leave. And already 20,000 have left, by the way, and there's no mention of this. And the less said about this, the better. Because this is happening because there are those forces in Europe, here in Israel, and in the Arab world who don't want this to happen. Because they want the Palestinian Authority to take over. That is not going to happen. The Palestinian Authority are no better than Hamas. But you have something that those of you, and I know you have him on here very often, Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who always spoke about the different Arab clans and how these clans are controlled different areas in Judea and Samaria. The same thing happens in Gaza. And these clans, and yesterday I saw somebody that everybody here may know. There's a Brigadier General Amir Avivi. You may know him. You may be familiar with the man. Well, he posted yesterday about the clans in the Hebron area and in Gaza who are partaking in these demonstrations in Gaza, that they're saying they want it to be separated from the Palestinian Authority. They don't want to be part of it. And Mordechai Kedar said this for years, that the clans are the ultimate leadership in the Arab society, and they want to separate and be recognized by Israel and cooperate with Israel. So in addition to what is happening in Gaza right now and offering that they be relocated to different locations, could be Indonesia, it could be in the South Sudan, it could be other places. I personally don't want them to be in Egypt or in Jordan because it's not going to improve our situation. It'll just give them a longer area from which to fire in our direction. We have to send them to Africa or to Asia someplace. But in Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian Authority will eventually be broken down into these different clans, which we can cooperate with. And their first responsibility and the first thing they care about are their families. So we should be recognizing them. This is going to happen, not immediately, because we have to erase a lot of the 20th century as we move in to the new 21st century, is what is happening in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, Syria, Lebanon, etc.
You know, Danny, there's this constant fallacy, which I think more and more people now understand, that there is a chance of two states for two people, and Gaza can be rehabilitated, and you just have to get rid of Hamas, and suddenly, overnight, miraculously, the Gazan people will join the Western world.
Yeah.
And I think now in Israel, after October 7th, people understand the fallacy they're in. But these types
Sorry
of
to interrupt, but on
protests.
that point, I think it's very important. Those who think this is going to happen, look at the demonstrators in the United States and in Europe, Britain, France, Germany, Sweden, everywhere, anywhere that the Muslims have moved into. They may speak English, they may wear American clothes or Western clothing, they may go to and attend Western academic institutions. Their behavior, as they've exposed from the 7th of October, and today we also understand that many of them were informed in advance by Hamas that this assault is going to happen, and they prepared in advance these demonstrations knowing that the Hamas is planning an assault on Israel. So these same people, if they are living in the United States, in Europe, in England, and haven't changed, how do you expect people living in Gaza that they're going to change just because Hamas disappears? It's not going to happen. We have woken up to that reality. We're not going to let that happen here anymore.
100%. But do you think, however, that those people within Israel or around the world who are grasping for straws, trying to see that reality, will point to these protests and even try to support these protests to show that in the here and now, Gaza could be rehabilitated? I mean, is it possible that while these protests, in theory, are harmful to Hamas, they could in fact embolden Hamas because they proliferate this fallacy?
Well, let's not forget, Hamas is not Hamas. Hamas is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not even jihadist. It's the real Islam, as they say, as they call it, and it is opposed to infidels. So Hamas may have become a burden right now for a lot of these Muslim countries and a lot of Islamists. So they have to get rid of them, and there's no sympathy there. So they'll give them another name, or they'll expel the leaders of it. It's the essence of what they want that has to be changed. And therefore, the plan that Trump has for this and the Trump administration of allowing relocation, Gaza is finished. Gaza will no longer return either to the Palestinian Authority. It will not even be Gaza anymore. There'll be a port there that they're going to build. It will be the port for the economy coming from, and the trade coming from the Far East, from India. The President of the United States met with the Indian Prime Minister this week. There are tectonic changes happening here. And beside that port that they're going to build in Gaza, and they're going to build it, and it'll be run by the United States, you'll probably have an American base there built, and it will become the biggest base, because I believe that they'll eventually move out of Qatar, because I think even this administration understand the problem that Qatar is, and that Qatar is the funder of the extremist jihadist Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so you'll have this base in the Sinai, and the United States will control that. And then Israel, as the prime minister this week said very clearly, that Gaza will lose territory, and certainly if they harm any of the hostages that are there at the moment, for every hostage hurt or not only hurt but killed, they will lose territory. This message is very clear and informed to Gaza, but because of October 7th, they're already going to lose their hold on Gaza.
Now, you mentioned the redevelopment of Gaza. I don't know if you said it about your beliefs and thoughts of where the Gazan people should be relocated, if any. I know we spoke about it before we went live. If you can share a little bit about your thoughts on whether it's a good idea to send the Gazan people to Egypt, to Jordan, or Somalia, wherever it is.
Look, you need enough that they can control. So I would say several tens to few hundred thousands, maybe to Egypt, to the Sinai. But I wouldn't be too encouraged about this because Egypt may have a peace treaty with Israel, but they violated it from day one, and they're even violating it even further in recent years and the recent months. So I wouldn't trust them. They allowed the ammunition to go in to Gaza Strip through Rafah during the time. So if they have them in the Sinai, they're not going to let them into the Egyptian territory beyond the Suez Canal. They'll put them in the Sinai someplace. So right now you have missiles from Rafah that can reach Tel Aviv. You think that if they move into the middle of Sinai, they won't, the Egyptians won't help them because the Egyptians and other Arab countries never accepted and never will accept Israel. They don't want to fight us. They don't want to battle, but they have no problem with there being a war of attrition against Israel continuously through the terrorist organizations. And that's what they did with Hamas over the past 20 years. So they're going to divert their attention away from the fact that they're not pleased in the Sinai by allowing them to attack Israel. So we can't have them there. Jordan have the experience of the Black September back in 1970 when the PLO and the Palestinians in Jordan tried to overthrow the regime at the time. So they kicked them out and they were moved into Lebanon. And within 5 years, you had a civil war in Lebanon because of the presence of the PLO there, and which eventually 5 years after that, 10 years after the expulsion, 12 years after the expulsion from Jordan, you had the Lebanon War because they built those bases to attack Israel from within Lebanon. So Jordan isn't going to have that. We don't want them in Syria or in Lebanon. So the best would be somewhere in Africa, and there are African countries that are looking in this because they'll benefit from this financially from the United States, and also in Asia. And an experiment happening right now was leaked in the Israeli media by those elements who don't want this to succeed, that this was happening in Indonesia. They took several thousand. I think that's eventually where it's going to happen, and this is the direction it's going to take. An interesting thing on this is those who are saying that it's not going to be acceptable, those who are still clinging on to the Oslo process. The European foreign ministers met a week or two ago, and after in referring to the Middle East, they did not speak about Oslo anymore. They weren't saying about that. They were talking about the relocation. So I think they too understand that this is a necessity. And that's going to happen. This Gaza will no longer exist as an Arab community, Palestinian or whatever you want to call it. It's finished. They went to war with Israel. They violated the Oslo agreements, and they lost. And that's what's going to be the conclusion of this. Once we finish with Hamas, take out the proxies of Iran, and eventually take out Iran.
Danny, I very much appreciate you joining the briefing, sharing your thoughts. One final question with the few minutes we have remaining.
Yes.
I have spoken to a whole bunch of people this week who have shared with me that they believe the current greatest threat to Israel is the internal politics, not the enemies from abroad. They're telling me that in all their years in Israel, they've never seen the infighting this bad. What do you think about that?
Again, this is when you take the Western media who are influenced by Haaretz and those who have an investment interest to weaken the resolve of the Israelis. I walked by the demonstration this week, and they don't notice the irony. While our soldiers and the best of our greatest generation are fighting in Gaza, our oldest Altakakers are demonstrating and fighting in Gaza Street in Jerusalem. It's pathetic. You walk there, there's a bunch of miserable, I don't want to get into this. The fact of the matter is they're very few, they're very loud, They're protected by the court system in Israel, by the attorney general in Israel, who is very selective in the process, allowing them to do these things they wouldn't allow anybody else to. Today, there's video of a demonstrator sexually assaulting a police officer, a female police officer. The same person that later on is speaking on camera how he's going to take off his pants now, an older guy. And it's despicable and disgusting, and not a word of that is said on the Israeli mainstream media. So Israelis see that, and most Israelis, and the other thing I saw there, they have these stickers that they put on against Netanyahu, against this and against that. Most of them are torn down already because most Israelis have no patience for it. But anybody walking the streets of Israel is familiar with these other stickers, stickers of the over 800 Israeli soldiers who fell, that their families post everywhere. And it's all a picture of this beautiful young man and with a sentence of something that they said, and it's all unity, religious content, of bringing us together. That is the real Israel. That's what most Israelis and soldiers coming back from the front are saying. You know, this is disgusting. We don't want to see this. So don't be impressed by them. They're the older generation. Their time has come and gone. The new generation, the younger, the greatest generation of Israelis. And on my show in Israel Radio today, I ended it with the swearing-in ceremony of the latest Nachal regime, that they were singing together at the end of the ceremony, these young men, and they were all saying, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai. It was such a beautiful scene, and this is the real Israel, and that's what's going to be victorious. So don't worry about that. It's unpleasant. It's a pain in the butt. Moses went through the same thing back 3,000 years ago. So who are we to complain about it? Nothing changes with us. There's always going to be that element of our society. But the core and the victorious side is the Am Yisrael Chai and the Derech HaAruka, the long road. We're not afraid to take it. And that's what will prevail. And that's what will be successful.
Amen. Danny Seaman, a great pleasure to chat with you. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. And don't forget to check out Danny's new podcast on JNS TV. We will be back with you next week, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday morning. We're changing the clocks here in Israel tonight, so we're back to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.